It's me, George Galloway, and it is the mother of all talk shows on WBAI, serving New York and the tri-state area, and taking your calls and fielding your questions and arguments over the next 60 minutes or so. To talk to me and to talk to our ever larger international audience on the internet at WBAI.org, you need to call me, 212-209-2900. Certainly seems there are momentous events. We've just been hearing from Amy Goodman and her guests about the act of barbarism scheduled for Georgia at 7 p.m. this evening. If the state kills Troy Davis, it will be responsible for judicial murder. I'm against murder, whether judicial or extrajudicial, and no state can claim to be wholly civilized when it is engaged in murder. That's my point of view. And in New York, of course, in the United Nations, all sorts of wheeling and dealing is going on to try and avoid recognizing the existence of a place called Palestine. And in Afghanistan, the war drags on, and the former president of Afghanistan, the hapless Rabbani, he was blown up yesterday by a bomb in a turban. Doesn't seem like that war is going very well, but the killing is going splendidly, and we don't even count the Afghans, but if we count the British and American and other NATO forces, well, they're dying like flies, and dying like flies for no purpose, because the end result in Afghanistan is the result that we could get today and could have got any time in the last 10 years. That's my point of view. I want to hear yours on 212-209-2900. And I see that Rick Perry has jumped on the Zionist bandwagon and denounced President Obama for his support, I kid you not, his support for the Palestinian cause. Doesn't feel much like support down on the street in occupied and besieged and in some places annexed Palestine. Okay, 212-209-2900. That's the number to call me. And Ife, without whom there would be no show, is fielding the calls. Ife, do we have any?
Yes, you have Judith. Judith from Upper West Side.
Marvelous. Judith, thanks very much for calling. Go ahead. Yes, Judith?
Well, this is not Judith. This is E.
Oh, I'm sorry. E from Lower Manhattan.
Yes.
Okay, E, you're equally welcome. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. Well, I like to give my perspective on an ongoing situation. The reason that governments can destroy massive amounts of people in heinous and criminal ways, it doesn't just serve the purpose of empire, it is also profitable. You know, if you look at a situation like with the pharmaceutical companies, they had a drug called Vioxx that killed tens and thousands of people, and they knew it was killing people in the clinical trials. But because the commissioners that come from the FDA retire and become what you call lobbyists for the pharmaceutical company, you know, like out of the last 30 of them, you'd have like 25 of them that did that. So it was easy for them to say Vioxx is safe and effective. You see, so you can have a massive agenda, not so much of a conspiracy, but people working on the same page that won't say anything, providing that they can all profit from it personally. They, you know, lives, you know, all the wars that have occurred and people getting killed around the world, and with the 9/11 situation, you know, it's relatively easy if the profit margin is there. If it's large enough, people will stay quiet.
Yes. Sometimes they wrap themselves in religious clothes, but I always say that people shouldn't be confused by that. Religious people believe in the prophets, peace be upon them, but these people believe in the profits and how to get a bigger piece of them. And that's the case in the military-industrial complex, as you say, and I've no doubt it's the case in the pharmaceutical industry. I can't vouch for what you said about that particular drug, and I wouldn't want to pretend that I could do so. I'm not aware of that particular drug, but there is no doubt at all that as long as medicine is reduced to the cash nexus, as long as medicine is just another business, then of course people will seek not to maximize the number of sick people they can treat, but to maximize the number of greenbacks they can put in their pocket or in their bank account. Thanks very much for kicking us off. I don't know if Judith is there now, but Aoife will tell me if there are any other calls.
You have me? You have me?
Judith?
Yes.
I'm very glad to hear from you. Go ahead, please.
We have an emergency situation concerning Troy Davis. The fight is still on. If everybody could call the District Attorney of Georgia, and here is the phone number. Get pencil and paper: 912-652-7308. Reiterating that it has to be 100% positive that he killed before they can put him to death. It's not fair. Please reconsider your decision. We're also in New York. There's going to be a vigil at 6:30 at 125th Street and Adam Clayton Powell, the Harlem State Office building, where we'll stand and then march to St. Mary's Church. Thank you.
Well, Judith, I hope everyone does exactly as you say. Call that number, put the maximum pressure on, attend the vigil, and pray to God that this heinous act of barbarism by the state of Georgia does not go ahead. Tell me, what's the feeling, Judith, in the country? Is there a possibility of stopping this killing, do you think?
Well, his case has been stopped 3 times before this. They were about to kill him, and it was stopped because it's just such a travesty of justice, and somehow things were discovered, and then they couldn't do it. So maybe this time it will happen again, that we will stop it.
And who can stop this? Is this the governor who can stop it?
Unfortunately, only that board of pardons, a small handful of white Georgian lynchers, and the DA maybe could put a stop on it, too. That's why we're calling the DA office.
Okay, Judith, thanks very much indeed for that call. I wholeheartedly support that heartfelt plea to try and save the life of Troy Davis. My number is 212-209-2900. This is the mother of all the talk shows. Now, Aoife,
we've obviously
we have another
settled
call?
our differences now, and as ex-Prime Minister, I'm very glad to say, here is George Galloway and the mother of all talk shows.
Just a bit of a delay. Sorry about that. But here goes Nick from Seacliff.
Yes, I thought he...
Hi there, Nick. Hi. Go ahead, Nick.
Yes, good morning, sir. How are you?
Very well. Nice to hear from you. What would you like to say?
I'm a retired police sergeant. This case with Troy Davis is an absolute travesty of justice, and I'll tell you how it can be stopped. People have to call the U.S. Supreme Court because the Supreme Court has all jurisdiction above all capital cases. Okay, so calling the governor's office is spinning your wheels, and the DA, because they already bought in, they already drunk the Kool-Aid. This is a travesty of justice here, and the world is watching this case. The Pope is against this case.
It's getting very wide publicity around the world. Of course, we can do both, Nick. We can contact the Georgia authorities, but we can also ask people to contact the Supreme Court, and the very best of luck with that, Nick.
Okay.
Many thanks.
Thank you very much.
Aoife is fielding the calls. We've had Judith, we've had we've had Nick. We've been talking about Troy Davis. We've been talking about the military-industrial complex, and we've been talking about the pharmaceutical industry, just another business. Aoife, do we have another call?
Yes, you have. Frank from Manhattan.
Hi, Frank. How are you doing?
Fine. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Nice to hear from you. Go ahead.
Listen, sometime in the past I read in a book that before the Israelis settling Palestine, they was trying to settle in Uganda in Africa. Is there any truth to that? You ever read about that or heard of that?
Yes, and not just Uganda. There were many parts of the world that the Zionist movement, which was a small group in the beginning of atheistic Jews, I mentioned that because it's now later post facto claimed that there are some kind of biblical reasons why Palestine should be wiped off the map and its people scattered to the four corners of the earth. But of course, there were no biblical reasons adduced when they wanted to set up their white European settler state in Uganda. self-evidently. And not just there. The Seychelles was another place that they asked for to set up Israel. Patagonia in South America, Uganda, and many other places were requests made by the white European settlers. They only wanted a colony. And they didn't care whether they colonized Ugandans or whether they colonized Palestinian Arabs. But that's what happened. And the situation in Europe for many centuries of bitter anti-Semitism, pogrom, mass murder of Jews, had still not, even by the time the British promised Palestine, persuaded the vast majority of Jews in the world that the answer to Christian anti-Semitism was to go and occupy somebody else's land and practice discrimination against them. It was only much later that the Jewish people around the world were weaned away from their traditional historic support for progressive organizations and trends and towards what is essentially a racist apartheid ideology called Zionism.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks for the call, 219-209-2900. That's the number to call me. And if you do, then Aoife will be there to field the call, as I hope she has. Now, Aoife, do we have another?
Yes, you actually have Raymond, who's up here from Atlanta, Georgia.
Ah, the place where the murder tonight is scheduled to take place in the eyes of the whole world. Raymond, thanks for calling.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. Nice to hear from you.
Interesting show. I'm up here from Atlanta doing the Hurricane Irene storm damage work. I was born in England, raised in England, educated in England, so moved to America in '84 and lived in California, a very liberal state. Now I live in Georgia, very Republican, very red state. Now I'm up here in New York listening to your show.
Marvelous. Great story. Go on.
So all I wanted to say was, it's not about Zionism. It's not about throwing around a lot of labels. People know truth. People know knowable truth. The masses, they know a truth when they hear it. They know a lie when they hear it. I think when we're bouncing around from Troy Davis in Atlanta to the problems in the Middle East to, Mitt Romney and the President Obama, it's all become very convoluted. The thing I want to say is what it really comes down to is, unless you're going to move, call a move to act, you're going to call a move, call to action to do something. The conversation to me just convolutes the whole entire landscape of this country where we're at. It's more
what movement do you recommend, Raymond?
What I'm saying is that it's consciousness. It's about consciousness. People need to educate themselves on themselves and their egos and their consciousness and their wanting the cars and the nice home and security. As a mass, the people of this country need to educate themselves on consciousness, on enlightenment, on a whole other path that has nothing to do with pointing fingers at the enemy. It has to do with going inside and searching yourself.
But you have to point fingers sometime, don't you? We have to point fingers at the Georgia judicial system, which is going to murder a man this evening.
I don't believe that the governor, that the DA, that any of those people care about you and your opinion and your finger pointing. What they care about is votes. What they care about is popular belief, is the overall consensus of their constituency. That's what they care about. If it's going to get them elected, if it's going to keep them in power, because it's all about power. Because we're living in an antiquated system. But
there are some things in the here and now that we have to make decisions about where we stand here and now. For example, here and now, the United Nations will decide whether or not to recognize a Palestinian state. Here and now, Troy Davis will be judicially murdered. So we have to act. We can't wait for this consciousness of which you talk, which I wholeheartedly support, to permeate into enough minds that we can bring about a bigger and broader change.
But we've got to start somewhere, and it's the sacrifice of Troy Davis, as people have said earlier on other shows. This case will radically change the way Georgia and the southern states and states that do have the death penalty go about doing their business of killing people illegally, illegal murder.
Yeah, so, I'm not ready to sacrifice them until
Well, I'm already hearing people talk about vigils and candlelight like they've already given up. Now, I'm not willing to sacrifice me. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that we don't have the power to stop these people from doing what they're going to do.
How do we get it, Raymond?
What we do is we empower ourselves individually, and then that's when you'll cause a movement. That's what the Egyptians did. That's what many other cultures, that's what the IRA did. I'm not condoning the IRA, but there was a physical, but there was a movement, there was a cause, there was an enlightenment.
Of course, I've spent my entire life trying to build movements and trying to influence votes. So, Raymond, you're pushing.
And does it not start within? So if it starts within, if it's about me, if it's about you, if it's about me knowing myself, my egos, my wants, my desires, and really coming to terms with me as an individual, from there I can become a shining example. We can become shining examples.
Well, that's what we're trying. That's what we're trying, Raymond. Thanks for the call, mate. I appreciate it, and I hope you'll continue to tune in when you go back to Georgia on the internet, WBAI.org. Aoife, do we have any others?
Yes, you actually have. Elliot from Staten Island.
Hello.
Elliot,
Hello.
Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, and thanks for the good job you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
Two questions I ask. Now, the Chief Justice of this country is is there for justice of the whole of the United States, and every citizen he is responsible, in my judgment, for each citizen of the United States. Don't you think that it is his responsibility to stop this execution as Chief Justice, because Troy Davis is a citizen of the United States?
Well, you'll know better than me what the legal hierarchy permits, but it seems to me that this is a matter for the whole of the United States and for the whole of the government of the United States. I don't see how this can be left to a board of white lynchers, as Judith put it. I don't know if they are all white or they are historically the kind of people who did the lynching, but whether they were, even if they were all Olympian and pure, it's not a decision that can be left to a small board of people, because it has national, indeed international ramifications. If the United States as a country does not care how it's seen, putting a man that many believe to be innocent of the crime of which he's been convicted to death, a judicial murder in 2011, we keep hearing campaigners on the right zealously promoting the cause of stopping abortion. It's amazing how many people are against abortion but in favor of killing sentient, grown human beings in the most barbarous way, electrocuting them, burning them to death, putting bullets into them, gassing them, putting poison into their veins by injection. If the United States doesn't care about how it's seen in the world, then okay. But if it does care, then it's something that should be occupying the Chief Justice. It should be occupying the President, if you ask me, Elliot.
And also, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. And also, there is something about the Republicans that seem to defy logic. Here they say small government, keep government off people's back, but they want to tell a woman what to keep in her stomach. And then when they refuse for the woman to have the abortion, when that child comes and that lady go and ask for some welfare, they say, take responsibility for your own action. If the lady takes responsibility for her own action and nurture that child, and that child becomes 18, they take that child and send that child to war. And there's something about logic that the Republicans really resent. Secondly, talking about 9/11, I wish I could agree with you that the government doesn't, that people in the government would not jeopardize their life to perpetrate this 9/11. There are many questions about 9/11 that they refuse to answer. Number one, why did George Bush refuse to be interviewed alone? And even when he was interviewed with the vice president, they refused to have press people. What did they have to hide? If this actually 9/11 was actually they didn't do anything to. Did you watch the film Loose Change?
I did. I also read George Monbiot's complete demolition of it. If you go to the internet, The Guardian, and read the article by George Monbiot, that's Monbiot, you'll see Loose Change scattered as loose change, for that's all. Elliot, there are many questions about 9/11 that remain to be answered. It may just be that George Bush refused to be interviewed because he's not capable of stringing sentient thought together, that he's not capable of giving an interview that would be remotely plausible. Any of these things is possible, but you need to bring me proof that something happened, not just stuff that we pick up on the internet. But thanks for the call, the first part of which I wholeheartedly agreed with. Aoife, do we have another?
Yes, you do. You have Agnes from right here in New York.
Agnes, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning. I've been listening. Number one, I know Judith passed some information on, which is good, but she's incorrect about the white parole board. The chair of that is a black man. The DA, the new DA there, Chisholm, is a black man, and the NACP and many black people in Georgia helped with his appointment. Also on that parole board were several black men. So it's not about the white racist killing us.
Okay, I'm glad you pointed that out, Agnes. I did make the point that I didn't know if the caller's description of them was accurate, and you've just shown me that it wasn't accurate. Thanks.
Right. The lawyers were on this morning, and they were on earlier, and they spoke on Democracy Now! That they are, this morning, filing papers with the Butts County Superior Court when it opens. They expect that to be then kicked to the Supreme Court, who could stop this murder. Definitely they could. The other thing is it's barbaric. It is on par with countries that we abhor, such as Iran. Mr. President Obama yesterday railed against Iran, and yet we are on par with them with this barbaric state killing. Also, there's a call.
I think America executes more people than Iran.
I believe so. I think we're on par with China. So, here we go. But also, there is a call to reach every avenue we can. We cannot wait for the consciousness to save Troy. And if you think that becoming more conscious is being played here, it is not about the black community being whatever. It is about a man being killed who is innocent.
Yeah, in the here and now, this day.
If we can say, yes,
we can't wait for the spread of consciousness.
We can do that work. Many of us have been doing that work.
Indeed.
Many of us are on the front line. But
Indeed.
To use
It's a false dichotomy.
It's a rationalization.
It's a false dichotomy,
exactly.
Agnes, and we must reject it.
I'm tired of hearing it. I'm tired of hearing. The other thing, there is a call to the Falcons, to every athlete in Georgia to boycott, to sit on that bench right now, to say you will not continue to play. There is a full boycott press of Georgia to let them know we will push every avenue and button we can, and that's what everyone should be doing today. That's what we should be doing, not talking about, we can't do this and we can't. No, have your vigils, have everything, stand on every corner you can, because now is the time to reach that consciousness. Those that were asleep, now is the time to say, wake the hell up.
Agnes, what a wonderful call. Thanks very much for it. I really appreciate that. 212-209-2900. That's the number to call. The mother of all talk shows.
Fighting the golden flakes of change with the milk of human kindness. This is the mother of all talk shows, and George Galloway.
Mr. President, that made no sense whatsoever.
I know. That's why I said it.
How true that turned out. I made that about 12 months ago. How true it's turned out to be, if you get my drift. 212-209-2900. Aoife is taking the calls. Aoife, do we have another?
Yes, you have Serge from Queens.
Excellent.
Morning,
Serge, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Mr. Galloway. If the mainstream media ever gets tired of missing white female tourists in Aruba, they could actually focus on the Troy Davis, the story that we truly believe is more important. And forgive me for changing the topic, but I know you're very passionate about the cause of Palestine, but have you ever visited an Israeli settlement, just to get the other side of the story, the other point of view? I mean, I know you view it as a park, but have you ever visited one?
Yes, I have.
Oh, which ones?
Kiryat Shimona. Filled with people who had perfectly good homes in Brooklyn, and who had never any reason to go thousands of miles and steal somebody else's land and set up a Beverly Hills type settlement on the top of a hill from which they dominate and occupy the natives.
Kiryat Shimona is within pre-1967 Israel, isn't it?
Kiryat Arba, I meant to say, but I have also been to Kiryat Shimona. Kiryat Arba is in occupied territories, above Hebron.
And does it worry you that the future state of Palestine does not want any Jews living there? No settlers, not one Jewish settler living there?
Well, there's no reason for Jewish settlers to live in illegally occupied land, is there? There's a country called Israel next door with lots of room in it.
All right, thank you, sir.
I thought that Serge wouldn't have the ammunition, verbal, intellectual ammunition, to deal with that very simple point. But this is not about Jews. It's not about Muslims. It's not about Christians. It's about the fact that there was a country called Palestine which was wiped off the map. There was a country called Palestine in which lived Palestinians, millions of whom have now been scattered around the world as refugees, without a state of their own, without papers in many cases, without any kind of status, and millions of whom now live under illegal, brute military occupation. And that occupation is wholly illegal. And Barack Obama knew that better than any man alive in the United States, because he learned it at the feet of the late and great Columbia professor Edward Said. He didn't have the alibi that the last president had of being an idiot. President Obama is clever. He's a professorial kind of president. He's possibly the smartest president you've ever had. So what's his excuse for being ready this day, this week, or in the next few days, of vetoing the recognition of a tiny, mini Palestinian state which he said he wanted to see come into being? That's my point, Serge. How sorry I am that you hanged up so quickly. 212-209-2900. Ife, who do we have?
Robert from the Bronx.
Robert, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, George. Two quick questions or maybe statements. Rick Perry calls himself a Christian, but yet he signed off on 255 executions. How can you call yourself a Christian and do something like that?
Yeah, you're right. It's complete contradiction. Would Jesus have executed 250 people? Would he have executed anyone? He said that if slapped, we should turn the other cheek and be slapped again.
That's right. And then I had an argument with a friend of mine who said, well, in the Bible, God says an eye for an eye. But you can believe in God and not be a Christian.
Well, this is in the Old Testament. The New Testament is Jesus' teaching, and Jesus would never have executed anyone.
That's right. So you can't be a Christian and execute people.
No, I mean, these people are just hypocrites, working themselves up into a rapture over the propriety of strapping a man to a gurney and putting poison into his veins to kill him with due solemnity. I mean, what kind of Christianity is that?
Well, let me ask you another thing, Mr. Galloway. In America, you have Americans who happen to be Jewish who have dual citizenship, who join the Israeli army. Why can someone, a Jewish American, join the Israeli army, but a Christian American cannot join the Israeli army? A Muslim American cannot join the Israeli army.
Well, even worse than that.
I think that's the only country in the world where we allow our citizens to join their army.
Even worse than that, Robert. If an American citizen flew out of JFK to take medicine and food to besieged Gaza, when they flew back into JFK, they'd be met by the Homeland Security Agency and grilled, maybe even arrested, on suspicion of having aided and abetted terrorism. Ask me how I know. Ask me how I know. Because I led a group of American citizens to do exactly that. Some of them lawyers in New York City who were grilled for hours by Homeland Security on exactly that suspicion.
You know, Mr. Galloway, I really believe that there are people in this world that want America to destroy itself. And the way they want it to destroy itself is by allowing, like, Republicans to get elected, creating these laws that they create, taking away our civil liberties and all these things. I think they know that America, just like Rome fell and Britain's empire fell, America's falling, and they want this to happen, and they prefer people like Rick Perry and throw away the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, destroy all those things. The better, the quicker America destroys itself.
Well, I'll tell you what I always say, that all I'm asking for from the U.S. government is a foreign policy that acts in the interests of the people of the United States. That's all. I'm not asking them to be pro-Arab. I'm not asking them to be anti-Israel. I'm asking them to act in their own interest, in the interests of their own people. It's exchequer, it's military, and it's diplomatic, political, social, cultural, and business interests around the world. And if they did that, they'd stop sending $4 billion a year to an apartheid state called Israel, thus making themselves enemies amongst the 1.7 billion Muslims around the world and many hundreds of millions of others. Robert, great call. Thanks for it. 212-209-2900. Ife, do we have another?
Ghazi from Manhattan.
Ghazi, welcome to the show.
Yeah, good morning, George. I just wanted to make a point. We, instead of going around blaming Obama and blaming this and blaming that for the situation in Palestine, why don't we blame the Arabs? I mean, Arab leaders, because if they should have to work on this before anybody else.
Well, I'll tell you why, Ghazi. Let me tell you. I'll let you continue in a minute.
Oh, okay.
But the answer is short and easy. Because we expect nothing from the dictators, the corrupt kings, and the puppet presidents who the Arab world, almost without exception, from one end to the other. Why should we expect anything from them? They're fake Muslims, they're fake Arabs, and they care nothing about Palestine. We, on the other hand, live in democratic countries who elect and can remove our leaders, unlike the vast majority of the 350 million people in the Arab world. Now, these dictators are starting so slowly but so painfully to fall, and we will see a very, very different situation when the Arab people have representative government. Go on, Ghazi.
Yeah, so my point was this, just like Obama has a veto, if they really want the situation solved, they can say, we have a veto, we're going to stop the flow of oil to the Western world. And I'm sure something is going to get done, I'm sure, but obviously
if the Arabs had representative government, that would have been done long ago. But the Arabs are ruled by criminals and stooges.
You're right. Well, okay, thank you. I just want to
Thank you for the call, 212-209-2900. This is the mother of all talk shows.
Here he is, comrades. George Galloway and the mother of all talk shows, guaranteed to destroy any weapons of mass deception.
That's me, George Galloway. This is the mother of all talk shows. This is WBAI, listener-supported radio, serving New York and the tri-state area and across the world now, because many people are writing to me from across the world saying they listen to the show on the internet, WBAI.org. 212-209-2900. That's the number to call to join the great debate. Ife, who do we have?
Noak from Brooklyn.
Noak.
Welcome
to the show.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Galloway. I'm a non-Zionist Orthodox Jew, and I would like to point out that contrary to the impression that unfortunately prevails today, Zionism is actually a violation of Judaism. The vast, overwhelming majority of the foremost rabbinic authorities have, from its inception, have rejected and opposed Zionism in all of its forms. And they would absolutely be turning over in their graves at what is going on today with the settlers and with the so-called Orthodox parties it's a disgrace. And
well, I know that there are a significant number of Jews in the world who feel that very strongly, and indeed on the American convoy to break the siege on Gaza that I referred to earlier, a group of rabbis were with me, and very fine and upstanding men they are too. Go ahead, Noach.
Okay, well, it just makes me ashamed, and I cringe, every time I hear about the settlers, being described as ultra-Orthodox, and when I hear about, it really is, it's painful to those of us who adhere to the traditional Orthodox stance.
Yeah. Well, let's just take one of those settlements that I referred to earlier, Kiryat Arba, which stands above the ancient Palestinian Arab town of Hebron, is populated by people who supported a man called Kahana, Meir Kahana, who was a wanted criminal in the United States. His movement, Kach, was designated as a terrorist organization in the United States, and yet the United States government continued to send money to Israel, used to buttress that settlement, and continued to give diplomatic and political cover, including the use of the veto, in support of the rights of these criminals to occupy somebody else's land.
Yes, well, Kahana was certainly a disgrace, and somebody who truly, muddied the name of Jews, and specifically that he, presented himself as a man of the cloth. It really was quite disgraceful.
Well, there's no need for you to feel that the name of Jewishness, Judaism, Jews have been muddied by these people. Everyone should be judged on what they do and what they believe. And I have never, you heard me say it earlier, I have never painted this thing as Jew versus Muslim or Jew versus Muslim and Christian. There are many Jews in our movement for justice in Palestine. And most of the people supporting Israel are not Jews. In fact, most of them don't even like Jews. If anyone thinks that Rick Parry is a big lover of Jews, even though he's a big lover of Israel, they've never visited his golf club. Noach, thanks very much indeed for the call. Go on.
Could I maybe just suggest a website for those interested in learning about the Orthodox Jewish anti-Zionist theological position, JewsAgainstZionism.com.
Excellent. Thanks very much indeed for that call. 212-209-2900. Ife, do we have another?
Ray from New Windsor, New York.
Ray, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, George. I see this from a different viewpoint as a British person.
A Scottish person, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, I've spoken to you before on your British radio program. The reason I'm calling was I picked up on a lot of things having worked in the media here in New York. And obviously we know that a large majority of those running the U.S. media are in fact Jewish. And
Are they, Ray?
Oh, yeah.
Is that really true?
Yeah, you never noticed, right? And
no, I haven't. No, tell me. Give me some examples.
Well, I worked for a large network here in New York City, and I was the only non-Jew in the newsroom. Okay?
Well, that's interesting, and of course I can't second guess you or wouldn't try to. But if we look at the dominant pillars of the media in the United States, if we look at the Fox News, if we look at ABC, if we look at CBS, if we look at CNBC, if we look at the big television networks, if we look at the biggest newspapers in the United States, they're not owned by Jews. Not that it would matter if they were. What would matter is what their political stand on the thing was, but they're not owned by Jews.
Well, the problem is, if you dare say anything about the Jewish community, you're automatically, or about Israel more specifically, not about the Jewish community.
Well, that's important, that distinction, yes.
If you say anything negative about Israel, you're accused of being an anti-Semite.
Yes, and that's the first fake weapon that the supporters of Israel reach for. But we just have to get past that, because we can demonstrate, can't we? I certainly can. I'm sure you can.
Yes, well, all I would say
for us to be against Jews would mean we were racists.
Well, yes, but they're not
There's
the
not a
only
racist
Semite.
bone in our body.
They're not the only Semite religion.
Indeed.
And that seems to go over their heads.
And many of them may not even be Semitic. There's a wonderful new book called The Myth of the Jewish People, which is on the market now, written by an Israeli professor, which actually, I think, establishes that the vast majority of Jews in the world have no DNA connection to what we called Palestine before the existence of Israel at all. That they were from Central Europe and were converts in the 9th century to Judaism. Now, I don't myself usually get involved in that kind of obscurantism, but as we're on the subject of Semitism, most Jews, according to new and powerful scholarship emanating from Israel, are not Semitic at all.
I use the Roman Catholic analogy here, which I'm sure you will appreciate. I was raised in the west of Scotland as an Irish Catholic, but it didn't mean I supported the IRA or Sinn Féin or any of their actions. And I think the vast majority of most decent people do not support the action taken by the few on 9/11 and in other atrocities recently. And you know, I don't know why suddenly just because you're a Muslim you have to be a terrorist.
Very, very good call, Ray. Thanks very much. One of my countrymen, and sharing a lot of my antecedents all around. 212-209-2900. That's the number to call. Aoife, do we have another?
Yes, you actually have Greg from West Milford, New Jersey.
First one from New Jersey this morning. Greg, you're very welcome. Go on.
Hi, Mr. Galloway. I just got to give you my opinion and call in. I think we need to get the heck out of Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, how many of our young soldiers must die? How many Afghan women and children and civilians must die? We killed bin Laden. Our mission's been accomplished. We need to get out of there. Washington needs to stop being so disconnected from the American people.
How strong is that feeling, Greg, in New Jersey?
It's very strong. It's very strong.
Because we've been there 10 years now, and our soldiers are dying every day, and our economies are going down the tubes every day, and yet we're continuing to waste our blood and our treasure on occupying somebody else's country in a war that is self-evidently never going to be won.
No, it's not. I mean, in addition to the loss of life, we have to stop the financial hemorrhaging of this country. We're going broke. What are we doing there? Why are we spending all that money there? We can't even see our own people.
The IMF report yesterday, Greg, the IMF reported yesterday that Britain and the United States and other parts of the international economy, but they singled out Britain and the United States as being two countries that, having not even come out of recession, may very well be about to plunge back into it. And it just beggars belief that countries that are in recession, who are laying off millions of workers, repossessing tens of thousands of houses every month,
it's just ridiculous,
whose economies are on the floor, can continue to spend untold billions setting fire to other people's countries for no purpose thousands of miles away.
I can tell you that people here know that they have no faith in Washington anymore. Washington is so far removed from the people, it's not even funny. It's like we're living under a military dictatorship. And as for Troy Davis, they need to stop that execution right now. That guy is probably innocent. They're just going to put him to death for no reason.
Great call. Thanks for that, Greg. Aoife, do we have another?
Galloway.
Yes, you actually have Element. Element, she is from Newark, New Jersey.
Yes.
Element, welcome.
Yes, peace. And I would like to make two comments. This is the 10th anniversary of the invasion of Afghanistan. Is it on this day, actually? Or it's just around this time?
I can't recall, but it's certainly around about now. Maybe a little bit later, maybe another couple of weeks. But anyway, it's 10 years.
Oh, okay. So maybe they're trying to, deny the clemency to start a new anniversary with the murder of Troy Davis, just to get over that. Because, the masses are asses in some cases. And my thing is, going back to Agnes, she brought up that the participants who denied the clemency are African American, but you have to realize it still could be race because they're under pressure to keep their jobs, you know. In this day and age, it's still hard to get a top position being of African descent. So maybe that's the purpose, too, that they know that Troy could be innocent, so they just choose to keep their jobs. And that's the
My goodness, what a price to pay to keep your job. To have the blood of a human being on your hands.
Yeah, but you also think back to a long time ago with Fannie Lou Hamer, and she was imprisoned, and one of her team members during that time period, I think he had to beat her. He didn't want to, but you have to think about those pressures you're under. But this is totally different right now, you know, because this is like somebody's life is at stake. But in this day and age, people want to be comfortable and just have a job and have a nicer house. So that's all I'm assuming with them. But they'll pay for it in the end, you know, but we're still fighting.
On the judgment day, we all will. Thanks very much indeed. Brilliant call, 212-209-2900. That's the number to call to join me. You've got about only 10 minutes or so get your call in now. Aoife, do we have another?
Yes, you have Hussein from Brooklyn.
Hussein, welcome to the show.
Hello, Mr. Galloway.
Hi.
How are you?
Very good, thanks.
I have to mention that thing you said earlier about the Arab leaders in the Middle East was 100% spot on. My family's originally from Yemen, and the way the system works over there, everything is corrupt from the top to the bottom.
There's a massacre going on in Yemen over the last few days.
Yeah. My believe it or not, I'm a born citizen over here, and my wife is over there, and it's tremendously hard to get the visa to get over here, and all we could do is pray right now.
Well, I'm in touch. My friends are leading the democracy movement in Yemen, and I'm in touch with them every day.
Oh, really?
Over the last 3 days, more than 100 people have been massacred on the streets of Yemen, and that's only the ones in Sana'a that we can count.
Yeah, and that's the numbers that they give you, but we all know that the numbers they give you is nowhere near the actual. I'm actually planning to go to Yemen, back to Yemen in a month or so.
No chance of any American and British intervention in Yemen, of course, because Yemen doesn't have any oil.
You know what's interesting? They do find reserves over there, but little. It's just the way that the system works over there. The ports have been sold to Dubai. Dubai broke down the ports because, you know, Aden is a very important port. They contracted the ports to Dubai. Dubai broke down the ports, so now boats go to Dubai to restock, refuel. They're slowly but surely selling out the country little by little. Last year when I was over there, the Minister of Oil was in a scandal of selling reserves that they found to a French company for the cheapest price in the history of the world. You know, obviously taking
the masses have risen, Hussein, and they're not going back to their houses until the dictatorship is brought down.
Hopefully. I mean, my greatest hope for this whole thing that's going on in the Middle East, and hopefully could trickle to Africa, is to create sort of like a Middle Eastern African Union. You know, one currency, one kind of like the EU, but you know, because if you know Middle East and Africa.
Let's start with an Arab Union. That would be a good start. Hussein, thanks for the call, my friend.
Can I just
appreciate
say
it very much.
One thing?
Yes, go on.
My main call is, about the whole issues in the United States. Like I said, I was born and raised there. I have a question. Like, would it be possible for it's naive for us to think that politicians approve stuff based on a morality issue in America. I've never seen it for the history of America. Even slavery wasn't abolished through a moral reason. Everything is done through influence and power structure. Would it be possible for Americans to set up a public lobbying fund?
Yes, of course, but there's plenty of lobbyists out there already that would do their best to strangle it at birth. You really need to break it down into issues and causes. If the Arab Americans had a proper lobby in Washington, if Muslim Americans had a proper lobby in Washington, if Americans against the death penalty had a proper lobby in Washington, well-funded, professionally organized, we'd be a lot better off. But most of the lobbies are lobbying for the amoral at best and the immoral at worst. Hussein, I've got to let you go. 212-209-2900. That's the number to ring me. Just a few minutes left. Aoife, do we have any others?
Ivy from the Upper West Side, right here in Manhattan.
Excellent. Ivy, welcome to the show.
Hello, Mr. Galloway. What a pleasure. How are you?
No, the pleasure is all mine. Thanks for ringing.
Thank you so much. I just want to ask you, to the concern also about the movie Miral. Of course, you know that written by Rula Jibril, and the film was made by Julian Schnabel.
I don't actually, so give me a summary quickly.
It came out. It is about a Palestinian girl actually telling her story. And it mentioned about 1969. It's like for the movement. It is on DVD right now because you cannot.
I'll look at it, yeah.
It was out. It started in March, and it was out in March, April, May. It is for no apparent reason, but it is a story. We learn story, what happened through writing, through film, this and that, and it was beautiful. I saw it twice, and the third time I wanted to go with friends, and it was out of the movies, the movie houses, and it was actually protested not to preview it at the UN, but they showed it. Now it is out, and I really don't understand why this person, Rula, was trying to tell her story as a Palestinian girl, what had happened to her mother, to her, and she actually wished that they can live together as a New York City, democratic Israeli and Palestinian, as New York City. I live in New York, and she was trying to be, living like New Yorkers, peaceful. And
what's the name of the film? Spell it for me.
Miral. She named it after her daughter, Miral, M-I-R-A-L, Miral. You should see it. So I don't know if we write about peaceful thing and talk about peaceful, are we going to face the same problem? Those of us who want to do.
No, only if we let it happen, Ivy. Only if we let the freedoms that our forefathers and foremothers fought for, if we let them go into that good night, quietly. But if we stand up and fight for the freedoms that we have and fight for further freedoms, then no one can take them away from us. Ivy, a wonderful call. Thanks. I'm going to look at that film up. 212-209-2900. Ife, do we have a last one?
Very, very last. He's been holding on for a minute. Monroe.
Yes, George.
Yes.
Hello. Listen, you said on your second program to me that Gaddafi was the most disorganized government in the whole world, or in Africa. I can't remember, but it included an awful lot of countries. And you then said, well, he doesn't have point contact this. And he's still going, even though they put a different government into the UN already. But
he's still going. He's still going.
Listen,
if you mean he's still driving convoys of the Libyan people's money over the border into Niger, if you mean that he's still fighting in one or two towns and cities, he's still going, but not for very much longer. You're not expecting him back in power, Monroe, are you?
But will you let me finish? The President of the United States should put in his disavowal of the Troy Davis thing and send even troops in to prevent a killing. Hello?
Well, I did make that very point myself, and I'm glad that we got your call in. We've had a lot of calls. I don't know how many, but not bad for 60 minutes of radio. And if you agree with me that it's been marvelous, then, God willing, join me again next week at the same time, in the same place. This is the mother of all talk shows. This is George Galloway. If you want to follow me on Facebook, go to George Galloway MP and join the scores of thousands of people who are talking with me and listening to me every day, thanks to social networking. It's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you.
None but ourselves can free our minds. Have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time.